My mother-in-law said I trapped her son with a pregnancy. So at her church's Mother's Day brunch, I showed everyone the texts where she tried to convince me to abort. I met Brandon at a coffee shop where I worked during grad school. He was kind, thoughtful, and nothing like his mother. We dated for 2 years before I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but we were happy. Both 28, both stable careers, both ready for this next chapter. Then I met Colleen. She arrived unannounced the day after we shared the news. Before I could offer tea, she was examining our apartment like a health inspector. "So, this is where you'll raise my grandchild," she said, running her finger along the bookshelf. "Interesting choice." The comments started small. Prenatal vitamin suggestions that became lectures about how I wasn't taking pregnancy seriously enough. Work schedule critiques that became accusations. Every conversation was a minefield. Then came the texts. Late one night, my phone lit up. "We need to talk about your options," Colleen wrote. "Brandon has his whole life ahead of him. This doesn't have to happen right now." I stared at those words. When I showed Brandon, he went pale. She wouldn't mean it like that. But the next text was clearer. "There are clinics that can help. I'll even pay for it myself. No one needs to know anything." I screenshot everything, blocked her number. Brandon confronted her, but she claimed I'd misunderstood. That she was offering support for all options, that I was sensitive because of hormones. The harassment continued through his sister, his aunt, every family member she could weaponize, each one calling to express concern about whether we'd really thought it through. At 5 months, I was showing clearly. Colleen still wouldn't acknowledge it. She'd introduce me to church friends as Brandon's girlfriend, never mentioning the baby. When someone asked when I was due, she'd change the subject like I'd just announced terminal illness. Then came Mother's Day. Colleen organized a brunch at her church, with all the mothers in their congregation. She invited me, probably assuming I wouldn't show. "It'd mean so much," she said sweetly. "I want to introduce you to everyone." I knew what she wanted. Me sitting quietly while she played martyr grandmother, accepting congratulations for a grandchild she'd tried to erase. She wanted to control the narrative. I spent the night before printing the text messages. Everyone. The abortion suggestions, the offers to pay, the manipulations, all formatted neatly with timestamps. When I walked into that church hall, Colleen's face flickered between surprise and fury. I wore a fitted dress showing my belly, refusing to hide what she'd pretended didn't exist. I waded through prayers, speeches about motherhood's blessings, Colleen's tearful tribute to the sacred bond between mother and child. Then, during open sharing, I stood up. I'd like to share something about the blessing of new life and the family that welcomes it. I walked to each table, placing printed texts in front of mothers, grandmothers, church ladies who'd smiled at Colleen for decades. I watched their faces change. Gasps rippled through the room. Colleen's face drained of all color. "This is out of context," she stammered. "I was just offering to pay for an abortion," I said clearly. "That context?" The room went silent. Brandon's aunt picked up a page, reading aloud. "This doesn't have to happen." She looked at Colleen with horror. "You said this?" I placed the final stack in front of Colleen. "I wanted you to know the full truth about what kind of welcome your pillar gave to her first grandchild." I turned toward the exit. Brandon stood by the door, his face unreadable. Behind me, chaos erupted. Voices raised, chairs scraping, Colleen's desperate explanations drowning in outraged church mothers who suddenly saw her differently. But then I felt it. Sharp pain in my lower back, spreading to my stomach. I grabbed the doorframe, gasping. Brandon rushed to my side, panicked. "Something's wrong," I whispered. The hospital room was too bright. I kept my eyes closed against the fluorescent lights while nurses moved around me with practiced efficiency. Brandon held my hand so tight I thought he might break my fingers. The pain had stopped during the ambulance ride, which the EMT said was either a good sign or a very bad one. Dr. Martinez pulled up a chair beside my bed. She was young, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes that suggested she'd delivered bad news before. "Your baby is fine," she said first, and I felt Brandon's grip loosen slightly. "But you're experiencing what we call a threatened miscarriage. The bleeding has stopped for now, but you need complete bed rest for at least the next 2 months." "I can't," I said automatically. "I have work. You have a choice," she interrupted gently. "Bed rest or risk losing this pregnancy. Those are your options." Brandon spoke before I could. "She'll do the bed rest, whatever it takes." Dr. Martinez nodded and stood. "I'm keeping you overnight for observation. If everything stays stable, you can go home tomorrow." She paused at the door. "And I'd avoid stressful situations. Your blood pressure was dangerously high when you came in." After she left, Brandon sat on the edge of my bed. His face was pale, hands shaking slightly as he ran them through his hair. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I should have stopped her months ago. I should have protected you from all of this. You couldn't have known. I knew what she was like," he said. "I just didn't want to believe she'd go this far." He looked at me, his eyes red. "I'm done with her. Completely done. She's not coming near you or our baby ever again." I wanted to argue, to say that was too extreme, but I was too exhausted. The adrenaline from the church had worn off, leaving me hollow and tired. I closed my eyes and let myself drift. When I woke up hours later, Brandon was asleep in the chair beside me, his head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck sore. My phone was on the bedside table. Screen lit up with notifications, 52 missed calls, 38 text messages. Most were from Colleen. I shouldn't have looked, but I couldn't help myself. The first few were apologetic. "I'm so sorry, I never meant for any of this to happen. Please call me." Then they turned defensive. "You had no right to humiliate me like that, in front of my entire church family." Then angry. "You're tearing this family apart. Brandon won't answer my calls. What have you done?" His sister had sent messages too. "Mom is devastated. She's been crying all day. I hope you're happy. His aunt, who'd read the texts aloud, had sent just one message. I'm praying for you and the baby. What Colleen did was inexcusable. I turned my phone off and went back to sleep. The next morning, a nurse I hadn't seen before came in to check my vitals. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with the kind of efficient kindness that came from years of practice. As she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm, she said quietly, I was at the church yesterday. I'm friends with Pastor Helen. I tensed, waiting for judgment or accusation. What you did took courage, she continued, noting my blood pressure on her chart. Colleen Sanders has been the church treasurer for 15 years. Everyone thinks she's a saint. She met my eyes. It's good to know who people really are. After she left, Dr. Martinez cleared me to go home with strict instructions. No lifting anything heavier than a phone. No standing for more than 10 minutes at a time. No stress. She handed Brandon a list of warning signs that meant we needed to come back immediately. Brandon's apartment became my prison. Not in a cruel way, but in the suffocating way that absolute stillness feels when you're used to movement. I spent my days on the couch, watching the ceiling fan rotate, listening to the neighbor's dog bark at nothing. Brandon worked from home, setting up his laptop at the dining table so he could check on me every 20 minutes. My boss had been understanding when Brandon called to explain the situation. She'd given me 8 weeks of unpaid leave, which was generous considering I'd only been with the company for 18 months. After that, I'd have to figure something out. We'd been saving for the baby, but 2 months without my income was going to hurt. On day 4 of bed rest, Brandon's phone started ringing during lunch. He glanced at the screen and declined the call. It rang again immediately, and again. It's her, he said flatly. You should answer. No. Brandon, she put you in the hospital, he said, his voice hard in a way I'd never heard before. She could have killed our baby. I'm not interested in anything she has to say. The phone rang again. This time, he turned it off completely. That evening, someone knocked on the apartment door. Brandon looked through the peephole and his whole body went rigid. It's my father. I hadn't met Dale yet. Brandon had mentioned him in passing, always with a careful neutrality that suggested complicated history. Maybe you should talk to him. Not while you're like this. Brandon, I'm on bed rest, not dying. Talk to your dad. He opened the door but didn't invite his father in. They spoke in low voices in the hallway while I strained to hear. I caught fragments. Your mother is distraught. She feels terrible about what happened. This is tearing the family apart. Then Brandon's voice, louder and clearer. She tried to get my girlfriend to abort our baby without telling me. Then she spent 5 months treating her like she didn't exist. I don't care how terrible she feels, she's the one who made this happen. More murmuring from Dale. Then Brandon again. Tell her I'll talk to her when I'm ready. Right now, I need to take care of my family. The door closed. Brandon came back to the couch and sat down heavily. He wants me to come to dinner next Sunday. To work things out as a family. Are you going to go? No, he said. Then, after a pause, do you want me to? I thought about it. About Colleen's texts, her comments, her fake smile when she'd invited me to the brunch, about the way she'd looked when everyone read what she'd written. I want you to do whatever you need to do, I said finally. But I don't want to see her. Not right now. Maybe not ever. That works for me. The days blurred together. I read every book on pregnancy I could find. I watched television shows I'd never had time for before. I learned to recognize the mailman's footsteps, the pattern of traffic outside our window, the exact time each day when sunlight hit the wall in a way that made dust particles visible. Brandon's sister showed up unannounced on day 9. I was alone because Brandon had gone to the grocery store. She'd apparently gotten the code to the building from someone. When she knocked, I made the mistake of saying come in before checking who it was. Melissa walked in with the same determined stride as her mother. She was 26, worked in marketing, and had always been polite to me in that distant way that suggested she was waiting to see if I'd last before investing in a relationship. We need to talk, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. I'm on bed rest. I know. That's why I came now. Well, Brandon's not here to run interference. She sat down in the chair across from me, uninvited. Mom is a mess. She hasn't left the house in over a week. Half the church is calling her, and not to offer support. I'm sorry she's upset, I said, keeping my voice level. But I didn't make her send those texts. I just showed people what she actually said. You humiliated her. She tried to convince me to abort my baby, your brother's baby. Did she tell you that part? Melissa's jaw tightened. She said she was trying to make sure you understood all your options, that you weren't trapping Brandon. I didn't trap anyone. We both wanted this baby. Mom doesn't see it that way. She thinks you got pregnant on purpose to lock him down. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. We'd been together for 2 years. I have a master's degree and a career. Why exactly would I need to trap your brother? Because he's... She stopped, seeming to realize how that sentence would end. Because he's what? Too good for me? That's what your mom thinks, isn't it? Melissa stood up. I came here to ask you to apologize to her, to try to fix this family, but I can see that's not going to happen. You're right, I said. It's not. Your mom owes me an apology, not the other way around. She'll never apologize. You know that, right? She doesn't think she did anything wrong. Then I guess we don't have anything else to talk about. After Melissa left, I called Brandon. He came home immediately, abandoned the half-full grocery cart, and spent the rest of the day reassuring me that I'd done nothing wrong. But I could see the stress in his face, the way his family was pulling him in directions he didn't want to go. That night, lying in bed, I asked him the question I'd been avoiding. Do you regret this? Us, the baby, all of it? He turned to look at me in the darkness. Never. Not for a second. My family is broken, and I didn't see it clearly until now. But you and this baby? That's my real family. That's what I'm fighting for. The second month of bed rest was harder than the first. My body started to ache from lack of movement. My mind grew restless with nothing to occupy it. Brandon did his best, bringing me books and puzzle books and setting up my laptop so I could watch movies. but there were only so many ways to pass time when you couldn't move. At my 6-week follow-up, Dr. Martinez did an ultrasound. The baby was growing perfectly, heart beating strong and steady. "You're doing great," she said. "2 more weeks of bed rest, then we can start gradually increasing your activity." "Can I ask you something?" I said, as she cleaned the gel off my stomach. "In your experience, how often do family dynamics cause pregnancy complications?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Stress is a significant factor in many pregnancy issues, especially sustained emotional stress." She met my eyes. "Whatever's going on with your family situation, make sure you're protecting yourself first. The baby depends on you being okay." On the way home, Brandon was quiet. Finally, he said, "My father called again. My mom wants to meet with both of us, to apologize and move forward." "Do you believe she wants to apologize?" "Honestly, no. I think she wants to save face and have everyone pretend nothing happened, then tell her no." He nodded slowly. "That's what I wanted to hear you say." But the peace didn't last. On the last day of my bed rest, someone left an envelope taped to our apartment door. Inside was a letter, handwritten on expensive stationery. "Dear Brandon and DIL," it started. The fact that she wouldn't even use my name was telling. "I've been praying about what happened, and God has shown me that I acted out of love and concern. I worried that you weren't ready for the responsibility of parenthood, and I expressed that concern in a way that was misconstrued and taken out of context." I stopped reading and handed it to Brandon. He scanned it quickly, his expression darkening. "She's not apologizing. She's defending herself and calling you a liar at the same time." The letter went on for 2 pages, detailing how hurt she was by my actions, how embarrassed she felt at church, how disappointed she was that Brandon had chosen to cut her out of his life over a misunderstanding. It ended with an ultimatum. "If you want to be part of this family, you need to publicly acknowledge that I meant no harm and that what happened at the church was an overreaction. Otherwise, I can't continue to have a relationship with either of you." "She's giving us an ultimatum," Brandon said, his voice flat with disbelief. "After everything she did, she's giving us an ultimatum." I took the letter and read the last paragraph again. "She thinks we'll cave. She thinks you'll choose her over me. She's wrong." Brandon took a photo of the letter, then called his father. I could only hear one side of the conversation, but it was enough. "Dad, I need you to tell Mom something for me. I'm not apologizing. Neither is my girlfriend. And if she can't accept that she was wrong to try to convince us to abort our baby, then she's right about one thing. She can't have a relationship with us." There was a long pause. "No, I'm not thinking about this more. I've thought about nothing else for 8 weeks. Another pause. "Because she put my girlfriend in the hospital, Dad. Our baby almost died because of the stress she caused. How is that not worth ending a relationship over?" After he hung up, Brandon sat down next to me and put his head in his hands. "I keep waiting to feel guilty or sad or something, but all I feel is relief. Is that wrong?" "No," I said, rubbing his back. "I don't think it's wrong at all." The baby came on a Tuesday in October. 38 hours of labor that felt like it would never end, followed by the surreal moment when they placed our daughter on my chest and everything else in the world fell away. Brandon cried, I cried, the nurses cried. We named her Sophie. Not after anyone, not to honor any tradition, just because we both loved the name. Colleen wasn't there. Neither was Dale or Melissa or anyone from Brandon's family. His aunt had sent a card with a gift certificate, but that was the extent of contact. My own parents had driven up from Florida and were staying in a hotel nearby, coming by every day to hold their granddaughter and bring food. Brandon and I were too exhausted to prepare. On the 4th day, while Sophie was sleeping in her bassinet and Brandon had gone to the cafeteria for coffee, a woman I didn't know walked into my room. She was maybe 60, with styled gray hair and expensive jewelry. She stopped at the door when she saw me. "I'm sorry, I thought..." She looked at the name card on the door. "Is this the Sanders baby?" My stomach dropped. "Who are you?" "I'm Patricia, Colleen's friend from church. I was at the brunch." She glanced at the bassinet. "I heard she had the baby. I wanted to drop off a gift." "Colleen isn't welcome here," I said, keeping my voice quiet so I wouldn't wake Sophie. "And I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Patricia's face softened. "I'm not here for Colleen. I'm here because what she did was unforgivable. And I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks what you did was wrong." She set a gift bag on the side table. "I have 4 daughters. If anyone had treated them the way Colleen treated you, I would have done exactly what you did." After she left, I opened the bag. Inside was a handmade baby blanket and a card that read, "For Sophie. May she grow up surrounded by people who choose truth over comfort." I was still crying when Brandon came back. He read the card and held me while Sophie slept peacefully beside us, completely unaware of the family warfare that had preceded her arrival. We took Sophie home on day 6. The apartment felt different with her in it, like someone had turned up the volume on everything. Every small sound made us jump. Every time she cried, we both rushed to her bassinet, convinced something was terribly wrong. My mom stayed for 2 more weeks, teaching us how to swaddle and burp and recognize the difference between hungry cries and tired cries. The first month was survival. I'd never understood sleep deprivation until Sophie arrived. Brandon and I moved through the apartment like zombies, taking shifts with her so the other could sleep for 2 or 3 hours at a time. My body was recovering from birth while simultaneously producing milk and running on almost no rest. Brandon went back to work after his 2 weeks of paternity leave, and I was alone with Sophie during the days, watching the clock and counting down until he'd come home and give me a break. On the day Sophie turned 6 weeks old, there was another knock at the door. I was so tired I didn't think to check the peephole. I just opened it, bouncing Sophie against my shoulder because she'd been fussy all morning. Colleen stood in the hallway holding a large wrapped present. For a second, we just stared at each other. She looked older than I remembered, with new lines around her eyes and mouth. She'd lost weight. Her clothes hung a little loose. "I know I'm not welcome," she said before I could speak, "but I needed to see my granddaughter. You need to leave, please." Her voice cracked. Just let me meet her. 5 minutes, then I'll go and I won't bother you again. Sophie chose that moment to wail, a high-pitched shriek that meant she was tired but fighting sleep. I turned away from Colleen and walked back into the apartment, trying to soothe my daughter. I should have closed the door. I didn't. Colleen followed me inside. You can't be here, I said, still bouncing Sophie. Brandon will lose his mind if he finds out you came. I know. She set the present on the coffee table. I've lost my son over this. My entire church thinks I'm a monster. My husband barely speaks to me. I just wanted to see her, to meet her and tell you. She stopped, her voice thick with tears. To tell you I was wrong. I turned to face her. You were wrong, or you're sorry you got caught? Both, she said, and at least it was honest. I thought you were after his money. I thought you got pregnant on purpose. I was trying to protect him from making a mistake. And now I see that I was the mistake. She looked at Sophie, her expression softening. Can I hold her? Every instinct screamed no, but I was so tired and Sophie was crying, and there was a part of me that just wanted this whole situation to be over. I handed Sophie to her grandmother. Colleen took her carefully, supporting her head the way someone who'd done this before knew to do. Sophie stopped crying almost immediately, probably confused by the new person. Colleen's tears fell quietly as she looked down at her granddaughter's face. She looks like Brandon did, she whispered, when he was brand new. We stood there in silence while Sophie made small baby noises and Colleen cried. Finally, she handed Sophie back to me. Thank you, she said, for letting me meet her. Colleen, I need you to understand something, I said. What you did almost cost me this baby. I spent 2 months on bed rest because of the stress you caused. Even if you're sorry now, even if you've changed your mind, I can't forget that. And I can't risk you deciding I'm not good enough again and putting me through this when I'm trying to raise your granddaughter. I know. So if you want to be in her life, you need to prove it. Not with gifts or apologies, but with actual change. With respect. With treating me like a person instead of an obstacle. She nodded, wiping her eyes. What do I need to do? First, you need to apologize to Brandon. A real apology, not the letter you sent where you justified everything. Then you need to give us time. However much time we need to feel safe with you again. Okay, she said quietly. I can do that. After she left, I called Brandon at work. He left a meeting to answer, probably hearing the panic in my voice when I texted, "Call me now." Your mom was just here, I said. Silence. Then, I'm coming home. No, wait, let me finish. I told him what happened, what Colleen said, what I'd told her. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Do you believe she meant it? The apology?" I don't know, maybe. She cried when she held Sophie. More silence. Then, I can't deal with her again if she's going to hurt you. I won't put you through that. I know, and I told her that. But Brandon, she's Sophie's grandmother. If she can actually change, if she can learn to respect us, maybe we should give her a chance. Since when are you the generous one? Since I'm too tired to keep fighting? He laughed, a short, exhausted sound. Okay, but she comes to me first. She apologizes to me, proves she means it, and then we'll talk about letting her back into our lives. Colleen called Brandon that evening. They talked for over an hour while I fed Sophie and tried not to eavesdrop. When he hung up, he looked emotionally wrung out. She apologized, he said. Not the fake kind. The real kind, where she actually admitted what she did wrong. Do you believe her? I want to. But I'm not ready to trust her yet. We agreed on a trial period. Colleen could visit once every 2 weeks, always with both of us present. No comments about parenting choices, no criticism, no boundary pushing. The first time she violated those rules would be the last time she saw Sophie. The first visit was tense. Colleen arrived with another gift, apologized again, and sat stiffly on our couch while Sophie slept in my arms. She asked careful questions about how we were doing, how Sophie was sleeping, whether we needed anything. She left after exactly 30 minutes. The second visit was slightly easier. She brought dinner, homemade lasagna that was actually really good. She held Sophie for 10 minutes and told us stories about when Brandon was a baby. She didn't criticize anything. By the fourth visit, something had shifted. Colleen showed up and immediately asked what she could do to help. When I admitted I hadn't showered in 2 days because Sophie screamed every time I put her down, Colleen took her without being asked and told me to go take my time. I came back 20 minutes later to find her singing quietly to Sophie, who was actually calm. She has reflux, Colleen said. Brandon had it too. Hold her more upright after feedings. I tried it at the next feeding, and Sophie's crying decreased by half. It was such a small thing, but it felt like proof that maybe Colleen could actually be helpful instead of harmful. Brandon noticed the change too. Over the next few months, his mother slowly transformed from the judgmental presence she'd been into something resembling support. She still had moments where her old opinions slipped through, but she caught herself now. She'd start to say something critical, stop, and rephrase it into actual helpful advice, or just keep quiet. By the time Sophie turned 1, Colleen was coming over once a week. She'd watch Sophie while Brandon and I went to the grocery store together or took a walk or just sat in a coffee shop for an hour, remembering what it felt like to be adults. Dale started coming too, meeting his granddaughter and rebuilding a relationship with his son. The church situation never fully resolved. Some people understood what had happened and why. Others thought I'd been cruel to expose Colleen that way. We stopped going to that church entirely, finding a new one across town where no one knew our history. Melissa apologized almost a year after Sophie was born. She sent a long email explaining that she'd been reflecting on the situation and realized she'd been wrong to take her mother's side without hearing the full story. She asked if she could meet Sophie. We said yes, and now she visits every few months, bringing elaborate toys Sophie is too young for and staying for dinner. Sophie is almost 2 now. She has Brandon's eyes and my stubborn streak. She loves books and music, and throwing food off her high chair just to watch it fall. She has no idea that her arrival came with so much pain and conflict and eventual healing. Colleen was here this morning, watching Sophie so I could go to a doctor's appointment. When I came home, she was reading to her granddaughter, both of them curled up on the couch. Sophie was fighting sleep, rubbing her eyes but refusing to give in. She's just like you were, I heard Colleen say to Brandon, who was working at the dining table. Stubborn about naps. Wonder who she gets that from, Brandon said, not looking up from his laptop. Colleen smiled, that careful smile that still held traces of uncertainty. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me another chance. Thanks, Sophie, I said, taking off my shoes. She's the one who made us all try harder. Looking at them now, Colleen with her granddaughter, Brandon at his computer, our small family that almost wasn't. I think about that Mother's Day brunch, about how everything could have gone differently if I'd chosen peace over truth. But Sophie deserved to be born into a family that valued honesty, even when it was hard. Some bridges need to burn before they can be rebuilt stronger. 2 weeks after that peaceful morning, everything changed again. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Brandon's partner? A woman's voice asked. Yes. Who is this? My name is Rebecca. I'm calling from County General Hospital. Brandon was brought in about 20 minutes ago. There was an accident at his work site. The laundry basket hit the floor. Clean clothes scattered across the carpet. What kind of accident? Is he okay? He's stable, but he's asking for you. How soon can you get here? I called Colleen before I'd even finished processing what the nurse had told me. She answered on the first ring. Can you come watch Sophie? Brandon's in the hospital. I need to go right now. She didn't ask questions. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. I paced the apartment, trying not to spiral into worst-case scenarios. Sophie was playing with blocks on the living room floor, completely unaware that anything was wrong. I kept thinking about the word stable. What did that mean? Stable like he'd be fine, or stable like he wasn't actively dying? Colleen arrived in 8 minutes. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. He's going to be okay. Whatever happened, he's going to be okay. You don't know that. I know my son. He's too stubborn to let anything keep him down. She released me and gently pushed me toward the door. Go. I've got Sophie. Take as long as you need. The hospital was across town, and traffic was terrible. I called his phone 11 times. It went straight to voicemail. I called the hospital back, but they wouldn't tell me anything except that he was still stable and in the emergency department. When I finally got there, a nurse directed me to a curtained area. Brandon was sitting up on the bed, his left arm in a temporary splint, a gash across his forehead held together with butterfly bandages. He looked pale, but alert. I'm okay, he said before I could ask. It looks worse than it is. What happened? Scaffold collapsed. I caught the railing on the way down, but my arm took most of the impact. He held up his splinted arm, broken in 2 places. I hit my head on a support beam, which explains this. He gestured to his forehead. But the CT scan was clear. No concussion, no internal bleeding. They're waiting for the orthopedist to come set the arm properly. I sat down in the plastic chair beside his bed, trying to stop shaking. You could have died. But I didn't. He reached out with his good hand and squeezed mine. I'm okay. Really. The orthopedist came an hour later. Brandon's arm needed surgery to properly align the bones. They scheduled it for the next morning. I stayed with him in the hospital that night, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair while he dozed fitfully between pain medication doses. Colleen brought Sophie by the next morning before the surgery. Sophie toddle-walked to Brandon's bed, confused by all the medical equipment. Dada hurt? She asked in her small voice. Dada's going to be fine, sweetie, Brandon said, lifting her onto the bed with his good arm. Just a little broken, but the doctors are going to fix it. Like my dolly? Exactly like your dolly. After they took Brandon to surgery, Colleen sat with me in the waiting room. We didn't talk much. Sophie played with the few toys Colleen had brought, singing to herself. I watched the clock, counting minutes. The surgery took almost 4 hours. The surgeon came out to tell us everything went well. The bones were properly set. Brandon would need 8 weeks of recovery but should regain full use of his arm. He was groggy when they let me back to see him in recovery. Did Sophie like her surprise? He mumbled. What surprise? I ordered it last week. Should have arrived today. He drifted back to sleep before he could explain. When I got home that evening, there was a large package at the door. Inside was a wooden play kitchen, the kind Sophie had been fascinated with at her friend's house. There was a card in Brandon's handwriting. For Sophie, for her 2nd birthday. Love, Dad. Her birthday was still 2 weeks away. He'd ordered it early, probably to make sure it arrived on time. Looking at that play kitchen, I started crying. For the accident that could have been so much worse. For the man who thought about his daughter's birthday gift, even while working a dangerous job. For how close we'd come to losing everything that mattered. Colleen found me on the floor, surrounded by wooden pieces that needed assembly, crying too hard to function. She knelt down beside me and just held me until I could breathe again. I thought I was going to lose him, I said. When the hospital called, I thought, I know. I thought the same thing. She wiped her own eyes. But he's okay. He's going to be fine. What if he wasn't? What if Sophie grew up without him? What if— Stop, she said firmly. You can't live in the what-ifs. Trust me. I spent 2 years living there, and it almost cost me both of you. Over the next 2 months, our family dynamic shifted again. Brandon couldn't work, couldn't drive, could barely function with one arm in a cast. I took a temporary leave from my job to care for him and Sophie. Money got tighter. We burned through our savings and started using credit cards. Colleen stepped up in ways I never expected. She came over every morning to help with Sophie so I could shower and eat breakfast. She brought groceries without being asked. When our credit card was declined at the pharmacy, she handed the cashier her own card before I could stop her. You can pay me back when Brandon's working again, she said in the parking lot. Right now you need help. Dale helped too, fixing things around the apartment that had been broken for months. He installed a grab bar in the shower so Brandon could bathe one-handed. He took Brandon to physical therapy appointments and sat with him during the long, painful sessions. Brandon's recovery was slower than expected. The break had been worse than they initially thought. He needed a second surgery to remove pins. His doctor cleared him to return to work, but the construction company had filled his position. They offered him a different role, desk work with lower pay. He took it because we needed the income. The financial stress leaked into everything. We fought about money, about his family helping too much, about whether I should go back to work, even though childcare would cost almost as much as I'd earn. The fights were sharp and mean, both of us exhausted and scared and taking it out on each other. One night, after a particularly bad fight about a credit card bill, I found Brandon sitting on the couch with Sophie asleep against his chest. He was crying quietly. "I'm sorry," he said when he noticed me. "I'm sorry I can't provide for you both the way I should. I'm sorry we're drowning financially. I'm sorry my family put us through hell and now we need them to survive." I sat down beside him. "None of this is your fault. You were in an accident. These things happen. I should have been more careful. I should have checked the scaffold before—" "Stop. You're not responsible for equipment failure." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "We're going to figure this out. Together." We did figure it out eventually. Brandon's company gave him a raise after 6 months. I found a job with flexible hours that let me work from home part-time. We paid off the credit card slowly, month by month. Colleen and Dale continued helping, but in smaller ways. A meal here, babysitting there. The kind of help that felt like family instead of rescue. Sophie turned 2, then 3. She started preschool, made friends, learned to ride a tricycle. Brandon's arm healed completely, though he still got aches when the weather changed. We moved to a bigger apartment with a second bedroom. Life normalized into a rhythm that felt sustainable. But the hospital had changed something fundamental. Seeing Brandon in that bed, broken but alive, had made me realize how fragile everything was, how quickly normal could shatter, how much we'd been taking for granted. It made me think about Colleen differently too, about how she'd shown up that day without hesitation, how she'd supported us through the recovery without keeping score or holding it over our heads, how she'd quietly proven, over hundreds of small actions, that she'd actually changed. One evening, while Colleen was reading to Sophie before bed, I found myself watching them. Colleen did all the voices, made Sophie giggle, kissed her forehead when the story ended. It was the kind of grandmother relationship I'd wanted for my daughter, the kind I hadn't been sure was possible after everything that had happened. After Sophie was asleep, Colleen came back to the living room where I was folding laundry. She sat down and picked up a shirt to fold. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Can I tell you something?" she finally said. "Of course. When you showed those texts at the church, I wanted to hate you. I wanted everyone to see you as the villain, destroying a family. I convinced myself you'd manipulated the situation, taken things out of context, deliberately humiliated me." She folded another shirt, not looking at me. But lying in bed that night, I kept seeing everyone's faces, the way they looked at me when they read what I'd actually written, and I realized they weren't shocked by your actions. They were shocked by mine. "Colleen, let me finish." I spent the next month trying to justify what I'd done, calling friends, explaining my side, waiting for someone to agree with me. No one did. Not one person thought I'd been right to send those texts. Even Patricia, who'd been my friend for 20 years, told me I'd been cruel. She set down the shirt and looked at me. It took almost losing Brandon in that accident for me to fully understand what I almost cost all of us. Not just Sophie, but the family we've become. The second chances I didn't deserve but got anyway. "You've more than made up for it," I said quietly. "Have I? Or am I just less terrible than I was?" "Both can be true." She laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "Fair enough." She stood up, picking up her purse. "I should go. Dale will be wondering where I am." But at the door, she paused. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for letting me prove I could be better. Some people don't get that chance." After she left, I thought about forgiveness. It was 1,000 small choices, constant work. But at least it built something instead of just burning it down. Sophie is 5 now. She starts kindergarten in a few months. She has Colleen's laugh and Brandon's determination, and my tendency to ask too many questions. She has no memory of the conflicts that preceded her birth, no understanding of how close her family came to permanent fracture. Sometimes I wonder if I should tell her the story someday, about the Mother's Day brunch, the texts, the hospital bed rest, all of it. Or if I should let her grow up believing that families are naturally this complicated and naturally figure it out. Brandon thinks we should wait until she's older. Let her be innocent a while longer, he says. She'll figure out soon enough that families are messy. Last Mother's Day, Colleen invited us to her house for brunch. Not a church event, just family. Dale barbecued. Melissa brought her new boyfriend. Brandon's cousins came with their kids. Sophie played in the backyard with children who shared her blood, her history, her complicated family tree. At one point, I found myself in the kitchen with Colleen, washing dishes while everyone else was outside. She was scrubbing a pan, quiet in that way that meant she was thinking about something. "Do you remember the letter I sent?" she finally asked. "The one with the ultimatum?" "I remember. I was so sure you'd apologize, that Brandon would see my side and realize you'd overreacted. I genuinely believed I could force you both to come back on my terms. What changed? Reality. You called my bluff, and I lost everything I was trying to protect." She set the pan in the drying rack. "Turns out control is just another word for fear. I was so afraid of losing Brandon that I pushed him away. So afraid of not being respected that I became someone not worth respecting." Through the window, we could see Brandon chasing Sophie around the yard, both of them laughing. Dale was taking pictures. Melissa's boyfriend was attempting to help with the grill. "You gave me something I didn't deserve," Colleen said quietly. "A chance to be part of this, to know my granddaughter, to rebuild my relationship with my son. I don't take that lightly." "I know you don't." We finished the dishes in silence. Outside, Sophie crashed into Brandon's legs, shrieking with delight. He scooped her up with both arms, the arm that had been broken now fully healed, and spun her around. She demanded to be spun again, and again. Looking at them, I thought about that Mother's Day 3 years ago, about standing in front of all those church ladies and choosing truth over peace. Some of those relationships couldn't survive that fire, but we've built something on that scorched ground. We know exactly where we stand with each other. Just the messy, complicated reality of a family that broke and chose to rebuild. When she's older, I'll tell Sophie about that Mother's Day brunch. About how sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior, even when it costs you everything. The family we have now is worth more than the false peace we might have had. Later that night, I think about all the versions of this story that could have existed. In all those alternate versions, someone would have been sacrificed to avoid conflict. This way, the hard way, the honest way, we had to actually fix what was broken. That's what family is. Messy and complicated and worth fighting for. And the courage to fight for it no matter the cost. The years passed in the way they do when you're raising a child. Sophie turned 6, then 7, then 8. Each year brought new challenges that had nothing to do with Colleen or family drama, school struggles, friendship conflicts, Sophie's growing awareness that the world wasn't always fair or kind. She was 9 when she came home crying because a girl at school had told her she was adopted. Because real families don't have drama like ours, the girl had said. My mom told my mom your family is weird. I was folding laundry when she asked. Brandon was at work. It was just us. And I knew this conversation had been coming for years. I'd rehearsed different versions of it in my head, trying to find the right words. What do you want to know? I asked, setting down the shirt I was holding. Why does Olivia's mom think our family is weird? Because we are a little weird. Not in a bad way, but we definitely went through some hard times before you were born. Sophie climbed onto the couch next to me. She was getting so big, all knees and elbows and 2 long limbs. What kind of hard times? So I told her. An age-appropriate version, leaving out the worst details but not lying about what happened. I told her about Colleen's text, about the Mother's Day brunch, about how we'd almost lost her because of the stress. I told her about forgiveness and second chances, and how families can break and rebuild. She listened quietly, processing. When I finished, she said, So, Grandma Colleen tried to make you not have me? Yes, but she changed her mind, and she spent every day since then proving that she's glad you're here. Does she still think you trapped Dad? I don't know what she thinks now, but it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is how she treats us. Sophie picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. Olivia's mom says her family is normal. She says normal families don't have problems. Olivia's mom is either lying or not paying attention. Every family has problems. The difference is whether they pretend those problems don't exist or actually deal with them. Did we deal with ours? We're still dealing with them. That's the thing about family problems. They don't get solved once and disappear forever. You just keep working on them. She seemed satisfied with that answer. She went to her room to do homework, and I finished the laundry, thinking about the conversation, about how much to tell your kids and when, about whether protecting them from hard truths was actually protection at all. That evening I called Colleen. Sophie knows, I said, about the texts and the brunch. A kid at school said something and she asked. Silence on the other end. Then, what did you tell her? The truth. An age-appropriate version, but the truth. Is she upset with me? Not upset. Confused, maybe. Processing, but not upset. Another pause. Should I talk to her? Explain my side? There is no your side, Colleen. There's what happened and what you did to make it right. If Sophie wants to talk to you about it, she will. But don't push. Okay? Her voice was small. Thank you for not turning her against me. I didn't have to. You did that yourself, and then you fixed it. That's the story she knows. A few days later, Sophie asked if she could stay the night at Colleen and Dale's house. She'd done it before, plenty of times. But this felt different, like she was testing something. Are you sure? I asked. I want to ask Grandma about the stuff you told me, but I don't want you there when I do it. I looked at Brandon. He shrugged. If you're comfortable with it, he said to Sophie, then it's okay with us. Colleen picked Sophie up on Friday evening. I watched them drive away, my stomach tight with anxiety. Brandon put his hand on my shoulder. She needs to figure this out for herself. What if Colleen says the wrong thing? What if she tries to justify what she did? Then Sophie will see who she really is. But I don't think that's what will happen. He was right. When I picked Sophie up on Saturday afternoon, she was quiet but not upset. On the drive home, she said, Grandma cried when I asked her about the texts. What did she say? That she was scared and mean and she's sorry. She said some mistakes are so big you spend the rest of your life trying to make up for them. Do you believe her? Sophie thought about it. Yeah, I mean, she's really nice to us now. And she always says yes when I want to do stuff. And she never says mean things about you, even when she thinks I'm not listening. You're very observant. I'm 9. I notice things. She paused. Mom, do you think Grandma really changed, or is she just pretending? I think she really changed, but I also think she has to keep choosing to be better every day. Change isn't something you do once. It's something you keep doing. Like brushing your teeth. I laughed. Exactly like brushing your teeth. Sophie went back to playing on her tablet. The conversation apparently finished, but I thought about what she'd said. About Colleen crying. About spending your life making up for mistakes. About how my daughter was learning, at 9 years old, that people were complicated and flawed, and capable of both terrible harm and genuine redemption. Sophie is 11 now, middle school, braces, the first hints of the teenager she'll become. She has a complicated relationship with Colleen, the way most preteens have complicated relationships with everyone. They fight about screen time and bedtimes, and whether Sophie needs to wear a coat. Normal grandmother-granddaughter stuff. But sometimes when I'm picking Sophie up from Colleen's house, I'll catch them laughing together. Or I'll see a text exchange where Colleen is giving Sophie advice about a friend's situation. Or Sophie will casually mention something Grandma said, like Colleen's opinion is one she values. Brandon's arm still aches when it rains. We still use the play kitchen he ordered from his hospital bed, though Sophie's too old for it now, and we keep it in the garage for when his cousin's kids visit. We still have credit card debt from those months after the accident, though it's smaller now, manageable. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours, built from the ruins of what almost was. And that feels like enough. That's everything.